Hey, what is going on? Eric Bach here with the Eric Bach Show. Today I sit down with Alexander Cortes. You can find him over at AJA underscore Cortez on X, the app formerly known as Twitter, and over on Instagram. Now, Alexander has been a long-term G in the fitness industry, and he runs the Kings Collective, a group where men understand that wealth comes directly from health, where you can transform your fitness, become a better father, and succeed as an entrepreneur. In this wide-ranging discussion, we discuss everything from fitness, optimizing your health and performance while you're traveling, fatherhood, and even entrepreneurship. You see, fitness is a force multiplier. When you dial in your health, when you dial in your fitness, you build the skills, the tactics, the habits, the strategies that you need not only to succeed personally, but also professionally. Conversely, if you've succeeded professionally, you probably have a lot of the same skill sets. You just need to transfer that knowledge directly over into optimizing your health. And today we're going to break down exactly how to do that. Now, if you're getting value directly from these episodes, hey, please do us a favor by supporting the guests that we are bringing on. Make sure you're giving them a follow, drop them a message, and leaving us either a 5-star review or sharing it on your favorite social media platform. All right, enjoy this episode. Alexander, what is going on, my man? How are you today?
What's up, Eric?
Man, great to have you. Told you as we were shooting the shit before we hopped on here, but I've been a longtime reader of your content. You do an incredible job of blending both the worlds of masculinity, fitness, and business, right? And I think one of the most important concepts that people, when they start to transform their body through health, learn to understand is fitness can be a force multiplier for everything else in life, right? The discipline, the habits, the skills, the rituals that we learn as a result of taking care of our body bleed over into different areas of life. And I know this is something that you talk about quite a bit. Can you give me a little bit of a background on you, on your training? What led you down this path to where you've got a massive audience over on Twitter? I see you growing on Instagram all the time. X, Twitter, by the way, I can't decide which one I want to call it. Twitter just pops up.
Yeah, backstory. My foray into fitness, it wasn't intentional the way it is for some people. I went to college 2007, 2010, got a liberal arts degree. It was originally a dance choreography. I had planned on being a ballet dancer. I wanted to do that professionally. Got injured freshman year of college, tore off part of my hamstring. Left leg doesn't work right still, but it's overall functional. But once you get that kind of injury, you're missing half a muscle. Yeah. Still got my degree, was unsure what to do. I realized I went through what's called now a red pill period. But I realized at the time I was getting this degree that, okay, it doesn't really have any value in the job market. The Great Recession was happening. My parents, they had to sell their house. I realized the economy, sort of the foray of professionalism and what we considered a career 20 years ago versus what we consider a career now. You go about to a career. That was changing. I didn't know how, I didn't know what it was going to change into, but I could tell that it was changing. So I was, nearing graduation and I didn't know what to do. I was searching for anything that I could make money doing that didn't require extensive certification or a lot of training. And I did like to work out. I had to do my own rehab after I'd injured myself. And I realized that you could become a personal trainer essentially in a weekend, fortunately or unfortunately. So I studied for, I think it was the ACE certification. I went to a weekend, what are they called? Weekend workshops. And passed the test, got certified. I eventually got more certifications beyond that, but I was a personal trainer. So I started training clients my junior and last year of college, Silicon Valley. And as it turned out, I actually enjoyed the job a lot because it was a teaching job. And I was in this very unique position where all my clients were older than I was. I was only, the majority of people I was training were 30 plus. They were techies. They were working in industries where they were, making significant salaries, 6-figure salaries, obviously, or fundraising for millions of dollars. They're working at a startup. They're dealing with very big ideas, trying to start companies. Even, this was 15 years ago now. Google and Facebook and Meta. These companies were not the, all-encompassing monopolies they are today. They were still sort of, somewhat emergent in public consciousness. But it was just interesting because I'm this 20-year-old kid, essentially. I'm training people that are making 100, 1,000x what I'm making. But I realized that your ability to make money in one domain, your skill set in one domain, it didn't carry over to health necessarily the way people might assume it does. And when you do get someone healthier, as you were saying, it becomes a sort of intelligence test where they need to apply those skills that they learned across all aspects of their life. Because as we all know, health is holistic. The time that you wake up, the time you go to sleep, your daily habits around how you feed yourself, exert yourself, walking, all these things are interconnected. You really can't pull them apart at all. Even maintaining a schedule. Okay, you're going to make time for exercise. It's a priority to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else is a priority? What else is not a priority? So it always requires a deep level of reflection. And that's where I really enjoyed the career the most, because you start working with people on a very personal level. It becomes very psychological. The exercise portion is, by my estimation, very simple, basic. We
Agreed.
could talk sets and reps and volume, and what do you think of low volume or moderate volume or high volume? But you can, those conversations are always going to happen, right? And they're not to say that they're not valuable conversations. They definitely are if you're a fitness practitioner. But for the layman, which is 99.999% of people, they
Yep.
don't care whether they're doing 12 sets for legs or 10, or whether you're testing out a slightly lower volume routine of 8. Like that's all irrelevant to them. Either their training is getting them results or it's not. And for that reason, I've always been very results oriented. And all of my content is still designed around sort of like the average Joe persona of people, where they are new to exercise, they're intermediate, and they're trying to get healthy, and they're trying to fit that into their overall life. And like I said, that's why I always enjoyed the work, because then you really start talking with people and you get to know people. You get to know people and you learn various lessons about human psychology, what motivates people and people's families, and why they do what they do, their personality type. And that never gets old. It's always interesting.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? It's funny you mentioned that, right? Because I mean, my background went through college, exercise science degree, did collegiate strength conditioning coaching, started going in the private sector. I was in Denver, Colorado at the time. I was working with a lot of people in oil, had some investment banking clients, probably very similar stress lifestyle that you had as well. And, like I was one of these guys, I'm like, man, I'm going to study. I'm going to get my CSCS before I graduate college. I went and did that. And I get in the real world and I'm not dealing with athletes anymore. And I'm like, cool to have the letters, but trying to apply any of this shit directly to most people, you know what I mean, isn't always the most relevant. And you have to be able to meet somebody directly where they are and really understand the, not just like physical barriers, but the psychological barriers for them to be consistent, because really everything in life comes from consistency. Many times it's consistently executing basic things and not outsmarting yourself to the point where you chase complexity that doesn't necessarily serve you or add unnecessary stress to the rest of your life. Right. And I think one thing I've realized even in business is that same principle reigns true. And I don't know about you, but like for me, it was being able to learn from these individuals, like how their brain functions from a business perspective, and being able to reframe a discussion in a way that they understand it. And through that, like conscious communication, so to speak, then we can start to have conversations on like, we want to do this many sets but we have to have that buy-in first in terms of how something's actually going to fit and provide a tangible benefit before just throwing a bunch of knowledge at people.
Yeah, I've said this before, and I think I've written about it as well. But learning fitness, it forced me to be a systems-based thinker. Prior to that, coming from more of like an artistic background, art is about feeling. It's very emotive. It's very past-driven. I really enjoyed that. Art does not necessarily have to find art. Art does not necessarily have to find objective, systematic process. Art tends to be very personalized. People choose themselves. And so that that dance background, I could talk performance choreography and theories of choreography, movement, how to draw emotion out of people, which is very cool. Like that's a whole different subject. But that said, does that apply to people who are trying to get fit, trying to lose weight? Not really. It definitely helped me in terms of establishing a human emotional connection. But in terms, like I said, systems-based thinking, everything that we do in fitness, and realize everything that we do in business that produces an outcome that you get success from, redefine. It comes from system of organized actions. What is a process? A process is taking different actions and you set them up into an arrangement where they all have established relationships. And if you run that wheel over and over again, you get a result. So it forced me to be more organized. It forced me to be able to create comparisons and arrange things out for people in ways that make sense. And it was, like you said, it was cool because doing that eventually helped me develop a business sense, which I'm not a natural business person the way some people are. Some guys have like a sales instinct. Or something. Everyone has that story. They have their friend who was like, when they were 6 years old, you have that buddy that he wanted to do lemonade stand, and just knew how to hustle people and could get people to buy three. I get 3 lemonades when they want one. Like that was never me. I never was motivated by money. No, I'm still not. But life costs money, and in today's world, you have to have a business instinct. So working with those types of clients who were way more successful than I was and older, that was a great education. I get asked that sometimes, like, are there books you recommend? And like, Yeah, I could give out books, but one of the best things you can do as a young person is just talk to older people in business and get to know them in some capacity. And just that osmotic transference will do so much for you.
No doubt. And I think inherently, when you're coaching people, people who are getting coached are very focused on self improvement. Generally speaking, if they're going to have the money to invest in it as well, they're probably somewhat doing pretty well professionally as well, where they can help distill a lot of those, a lot of that wisdom. Again, like as you mentioned, it's osmosis, being around these people and absorbing not just what they talk about, but actions, behaviors, how they carry themselves in different ways can build a lot of things that are going to attract, a lot of that like wealth, success, whatever you want directly into your life. Again, like some of my first clients, I mean, I'm just a kid from the Midwest, very like blue collar background. And the gym that I first worked at in Denver was attached to a Ritz-Carlton.
Oh,
And
nice.
the owner was a strength coach of the Denver Nuggets. I'm like, hey, this is a great clientele, but I'm like fish out of water. And I remember the first time I pulled up and parked, I just pulled up. I'm like, hey, can I park here? And I parked in this parking lot. Meanwhile, like I'm dead broke, fresh out of college, and got back to my car, and it was like $60 for parking for the day. I'm like, what? Oh man, how am I going to make this work? Right. And anyway, it just ended up being like a crash course, right? A crash course in success and personal development. And I think that's one reason, people in the industry kind of joke about this, but like you find a lot of people who get started as personal trainers branch off to so many different types of business.
Yeah.
And on some hand, like, are some people grifters? Like, of course, they learn a little bit of digital marketing. They make $10,000 one month and say, I can teach you how to make 6 figures a year. But on the other hand, there's always like that personal development aspect that many people who become coaches have. And if you surround yourself with the right people, like, yeah, you can really develop a lot of skills. You can develop a really powerful network. And frankly, really develop a social environment that's going to be very impactful from that business sense. Now, something else I've seen you discuss, and I think you do this incredibly well, is the importance of a social environment on your health.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on how important that is?
The phrase I always like to use is that you are never going to win a war against your environment. And I come from a family where part of the family is Hispanic. A lot of them are overweight, obese. And you see how that's very familial, generational. Your habits are never random. The behaviors that you pick up in childhood, they don't come out of that. You absorb them from the people that you know. You absorb them from your family. You absorb them from your peer group. And as much as we like to think that we're rebellious and we're defined, no one truly is. Behavior is mimetic. We're always copying people around us. If you put someone into an environment where everybody is fit, by default, they're probably going to take an interest in fitness because that's what everybody else is doing. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to relate to that group. That's the reality of it. And when you have people where you're trying to get them healthy, that's always one of the areas you have to address where they're overweight, wife is overweight, their eating behaviors are, how do you say, fattening eating behaviors. You're going to have to do some work with your spouse, with your significant other, with potentially your children, where you're going to have to reestablish different patterns of behavior. And that's really what's challenging. One of the biggest markets in fitness is always the single guys in their 20s, which, when you're in your 20s, you're single, you're not depending upon anyone else. You can choose your peer group. Especially if you're moving to a big city, maybe you got some roommates. Hey guys, still go to the gym. There's that whole bro culture, and it's fun, right? None of those guys have money, or if they do have money, they're spending it like on Gorilla Mind supplements. Like I wrote tons of programs for young guys when I was in my 20s. It was awesome, right?
Yeah.
But those are not the guys you necessarily want to build a business around if you're doing coaching. I got older now. I'm in my 30s. I know you're in your 30s. You start working with guys who are in their 30s. Back when I was personal training with clients from their 30s. And the people who are paying for training, the people who really want to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on you, they need you to help them with their psychology and their behaviors and managing their social environment as to, okay, how do I go about changing that or changing my relationship with it? Like I said, that's challenging because that's going to require giving them the courage to actually speak up, and show up in those situations and say, hey, like, we are going to establish a baseline.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it on the head, right? And I think I would like to dig in maybe to the family environment a little bit more specifically. We can take this a number of different directions, but I've always found that I think one of the most important roles for men is to lead by example, right? And I feel like that's something that doesn't necessarily happen as often as it should, whether, we can look at any different things, changing more or less economic breakdown, different roles and how that has shifted, in terms of, I guess, the nuclear family, so to speak, or more or less the erosion of it. Because personally for me, right, it's like habits aren't taught, they're caught. Alluding to what you said before, it's we absorb exactly what our environment is like. And I'm like, I remember getting involved in exercise because my dad would come home after work, after martial arts, he would stretch on the floor. 5 years old, I want to be like dad. He's stretching on the floor. Cool. Then I start doing push-ups, just like little things like that. And leading from example, I think, is so important. But I find that so many men struggle to do it, whether it's asking for support from a spouse to make these changes, or frankly, being scared to ask for that support. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so that's a good phrase. Habits are caught. I like. I'll have to credit you with that one. That's really good. Growing up, I'll use my background to give you some thought. So my parents have been like lifelong exercise enthusiasts. I have some of my earliest memories are going to the gym with them, being put in the kids club, kids daycare, and they
Yeah.
were going to work out together. So that was just very normal. I remember being 3, 4, 5. We're going to the gym. It's a weekend gym trip. We have a toddler now. We take him to the gym, come in the kids club, we go upstairs to lift. And so, that was something where even at a young age, I sort of just, not that you have like deep abstinence as a 4-year-old. I think I had this sort of this assumption as a child that at some point or another, I'll be doing that too, because my parents were doing it. So just going to follow along with it, right? Why wouldn't you? And then it wasn't until I really got older, and when I say older, I was like maybe middle school, even late 4th, 5th grade, where I realized, hey, like most parents actually don't exercise that much, because I can see the difference, right? You see, like most people's parents are overweight, their dads are they got a gut. My dad is very fit. I was like, oh, okay, I guess our behavior is different from other people's behavior. My parents are different from their parents. And then I got into high school. I started lifting. Never stopped, obviously. But what I tell my male clients now is that you have a set of default behaviors you act out every day. Whether you are conscious of it or not, you have a set of default behaviors. And your default behaviors are what you need to change. Now, if you have a spouse where you set a standard where she knows implicitly that you're lazy and you eat what you want and you're going to be, whatever it is, a stereotypical beer drinker, you're spending the whole weekend on the couch, is that going to give her any reason to hold herself to some sort of higher standard than you and stay in shape? No.
Hell no.
No.
Hell no.
Yeah. I'm like, fuck no. You can argue about like my wife should be want to stay hot for me. I'm like, you can think all those things, bro. But look at you. The reality is like we get very blunt with like the dating market, like men being attracted to women. We're attracted to the opposite sex because the other person's hot. That was when you first met your wife, you thought she was hot. Okay, she thought you were hot. So if you want to maintain the standard of male hotness, you need to work out. I don't consider that arguable. If you want her to stay hot, well, how do you get her to do that? Well, a way to take advantage in a good way of women's sort of natural attraction to you and their own security is, well, if my husband's hot and in shape, he works out, I should probably do that too. Now, if you didn't do that and now you're 10 years into the relationship, okay, like now you're going to have the conversation of, hey, honey, baby, whatever you call your wife, I'm going to start getting in shape. I hired a trainer. I'm doing this. This is something I am serious about. You need to express that clearly and honestly. And I need your support in this. I'd like you to be a part of it. And hopefully if you have a good relationship, that she's okay, you know what, I'll help you, or, whatever the case may be, I'll go with you to the gym, or I want you to do this. If she starts fighting you on it, or other family members start fighting you on it, okay, well, now you have familial tension you're going to have to resolve, and you may have to, I'm not saying divorce your wife, but you're going to have to go through an uncomfortable period of there being that discourse and her seeing that you are actually serious about this. Yeah, and typically, once you do that for so many weeks, like, the wife will realize, okay, like my husband's actually is making a real change. Like women, often shit test men. If you set a standard in the relationship that's changing after a decade, yeah, she's probably going to be pretty doubtful. Women generally don't like it when you change in ways that they're not expecting. That's not to say that you can't, but you have to be firm about it. If you wilt and then it becomes, oh, I want to do this, but it's causing problems. Well, okay, now you're back to where you started, and you already know what you're going to get with that. That's how you're living now.
Exactly. Again, it's like if you want to build self-confidence and self-belief, it's making promises to yourself and keeping them. If you want to build a relationship that is predicated on belief and support, you have to express it, and you have to, if you're going to do something, you have to fully commit to it and make it happen. And as you mentioned, the psychology between, men and women is different, and women inherently are going to generally seek a bit more security. And so if you've had past behaviors that have indicated you're not going to be a secure partner based on making promises and not following through on them, yeah, that's going to create that undertie, that friction that's going to make it more difficult to make those changes, right? And so I think it all starts with taking extreme responsibility for where you're at and being clear-cut in your communication on the changes that you want to make and sticking with it.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's something that men struggle with, is like what you just said, with clear communication. You actually have to say what you mean. Yeah, and you see, I mean, every guy has probably gone through this at some point, especially if you're younger, when we first were teenage boy,
Yeah.
you're attracted to girls, and you're mush mouth trying to talk to them. You're studying over your words,
Yeah.
and like you don't know what to say. You're bullshitting. You're trying to sound cool, like you're screwing it up, and the girl knows you're screwing it up. At the same time, it's awkward for both of you. Like it's a normal thing.
God, trauma response over
No,
here.
it's a normal thing. I tell the younger guys this is that human interaction, like before, we live in a time of like both extreme censorship and a lot of misunderstanding about men and women. But if you'd grown up, let's say, the 1990s or early 2000s, there was an underlying understanding, because this is natural throughout human history, it's human biology, that communication between men and women is always kind of awkward, especially when you're young, because you're not confident, they're not confident. Like that's never a smooth process. Now, optimally, over the course of your lifetime as a man, you get into your 20s or 30s, and you're more confident. You're an older guy. You express yourself coherently. You have courage when you speak. You're not embarrassed to be talking to a girl. Optimally, right? Ideally. But for a lot of men, they actually never reach that state. They might get married and they have a wife, that when they go to talk to her, honey, hey, it's still passive. I hope, I hope it goes well. There's this entire energy of not being the leading partner. And you can see that when I saw that with clients when I trained women and their husbands would come in, and like the wife was trying to get their husband I want my husband to work out. And the husband and wife would talk, and you'd see it's like your husband, he doesn't really lead the relationship. Like, she runs both the domestic home. He's working, obviously he's doing his job there, but he doesn't want to actually take charge in your interactions. It was very obvious. And sometimes their husband would work out. They'd finally, okay, I got the guy signed up. And I'd have to do like, some like bro relationship coaching, like, hey man, like, I'm just gonna level with you. Like, you need to actually like tell your wife what you want to do. Like, tell her, not beat around the bush. Like, say this,
And then
this
hit.
yeah. Say exactly what you'd like to say. What do you want to say? I need time on the weekend to go work out. Then just say that. Why are you turning this? Why are you turning your needs into a negotiation?
Yeah, and I think, again, it's a partnership, right? And I think it's a case where if the relationship is secure and people have good communication, both partners should feel free to be able to do that, right? Like, my wife is active. She's an athlete. She works, does a phenomenal job. And like, for her, it's like, if she decides, hey, I'm going to go do this thing, I'm like, awesome. I'm totally in support of that. Like, we don't need to have a conversation. We don't need to have permission to do these different things, because we've built this relationship based on a series of action steps and habits, and frankly, expectations that have continuously been met, that lead to a lot less friction, right? I mean, like any couple, do we have disagreements? Of course, who doesn't? But so much of it comes down to clear-cut communication, and then sticking with your word, and again, communicating your needs really from the top. I think that's such an important component. Now, we see this probably in men of every age. I mean, I've seen it with my clients who are 50s and 60s, who are trying to get into shape. Maybe they were in shape and just kind of fell off the wagon, committing to building their business, whatever it is, for the last couple of decades. Let's say we have one of those individuals who is successful financially, and they're looking to make that jump into improving their health. They've realized that they're being limited now by their lack of health. How do you get that person started? And let's say they do have that support at home. They do have that environment where they can commit to it. Where do you begin?
Start in the morning. What I always tell those types of clients is we need to do an audit of your schedule, because everybody follows a schedule, whether you think you do or not. If you have a schedule, if you're successful, you certainly have to have a schedule. We're going to look at your schedule, and we're not going to carve. I'm not asking for 6 hours, obviously. We're going to carve out a dedicated 2 hours a week, 2 days a week, maybe 3 half hours, and that will be the training time. But we're going to do that as early as possible. So we're going to, because I have the perspective that if anything's important, it gets done in the morning. Nobody likes to take business calls at for obvious reasons. Nobody wants to have meetings.
Yeah.
If it's important, it's getting done first. So we're going to make your health the first thing you take care of in the morning. And we're going to, if it's just starting with, I always like to start with exercise first before training. The reason being that if you get someone training hard, or they're sore, their bodies, they're feeling it, the necessity of protein intake and eating for energy, it suddenly becomes very real. It's like, oh wow, like if I have a really intense workout and then I don't eat anything for 6 hours, and energy levels progress. Damn, how do you solve that problem? You could have had post-workout shake. Very basic stuff, right? But you have to start with basics. Yeah. So I'm like, we're going to start with the schedule, and we're going to start prioritizing your health in the morning, and we're going to do that first before anything else. And from that, this one change in establishing that exercise habit, that will be the foundation for everything else. And then, like I said, then you can layer on different behaviors. And then you can add in, okay, let's talk about nutrition. Okay, let's look at the rest of the day. Let's talk about increasing walk activity levels. But training by itself, like that's always going to be the primary driver, both for obvious physiological reasons, but also psychological.
No doubt. I think it's important to set that morning habit, doing something consistent. Even if you're not hitting the gym each day, like if you're up consistently at that same time, maybe going for a walk, whatever it is, it sets that expectation. And frankly, it's going to help regulate mood. It's going to help regulate digestion. It's going to help regulate, frankly, everything else. I find a lot of people run into issues when they try to backload their workout to the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we've all been there, right? I'm sure you pull up your inbox at the end of the day, like there's something brand new. Or if you have a organized schedule, maybe you add things at the end of the day and you could always try to pin them on. There's always a reason not to do it if you wait. So getting that consistent movement early in the day, it's just stacking that win for yourself. And when you do that, it sets the table to make better decisions for the rest of the day, right? You'll probably eat better. It's like, yeah, as you mentioned, right? Like I trained. Oh, yeah. Damn, I want to be able to walk later on because I did squats. So let's get that damn protein shake in. Well, pretty soon your protein intake is higher. And by extension of that, cool, you're probably going to have fewer cravings, better hunger regulation all the way through. And so it's about finding those anchor behaviors and setting those in at a time that's non-negotiable. And that really sets the ball forward for where you want to go.
Yes. Yeah, it sets a standard. Everyone that I've seen this many times, there are guys who are successful, but they don't follow a real schedule. They manage to be productive, but it's very chaotic. Usually guys who travel a lot. It's like after I'm from work, like I'm in Singapore. Then next week I'm going to be in Houston. Next week I go to New York. I'm very upfront. Like I understand, like yes, you have demands placed upon your time, but you're not going to be in the same place. Diet is always going to be a challenge, especially if you're doing the very stereotypical. I got to take clients out. Okay, regardless, you have to get this training done in the morning. Like because if that like, you have to look long-term mindset. Is your health negotiable to you? No, I don't want my health to be negotiable. I want to take care of it. Okay, well then it has to be non-negotiable now. Which means if that requires, is stereotypical but true, if that requires being part of the 6 a.m. club and going to the gym when it opens, or, in the a.m., obviously before the sun rises, then that's what it takes. Yeah, and ironically, you'll probably have more entry throughout the day and probably have a better bedtime because you probably keep yourself up unnecessarily. And now you've set a better schedule in motion for yourself that again you can build on long term.
Yeah, I mean, you've got me thinking right now. I've talked about this individual before, on my podcast, but I've got this client Brian. He was second or third client I got like out of college once I moved to Colorado. And tell you what, working with him, he lived 45 minutes away, showed up at 6 a.m., 3 days a week, like absolute clockwork. And he went from a guy who was working the oil industry. He's doing well. He was an executive. But during that same time frame when I've worked with him, like he's gotten his master's. He's raised a family. I believe he's exited 2 businesses now. Like he's done incredibly well. And why? I'm not saying it's just from exercising. It's because of the actual habit and of the ritual, which is a non-negotiable thing for him to get that exercise done early in the day, because that's when he has the most semblance of control. And it's that anchor behavior that really helps everything else, right? And again, like fitness is a force multiplier. It's going to bleed over into everything else that you need. Who doesn't need better cognitive function? Who doesn't need more energy? Who doesn't need more vitality? Well, if you want to improve those things to the cellular level, it's got to be that non-negotiable piece, right? I love what you said, that is your health negotiable to you? No. Cool. Then it has to be non-negotiable in your schedule every damn day. Not every damn day, but again, on a consistent basis where it becomes that behavior that you need. You mentioned the travel component. Mm-hmm. You have been quite a traveler yourself.
I travel a lot, yes.
I mean, I feel one thing that you do that's so interesting in your content as well is like you pick something up from all these different cultures that you go to. I know you had some stuff go viral, talking about India. Tell us about some of the locations that you've been to and maybe some lessons that you learned that you apply to your clients, to your content.
Yeah, I travel a lot. I have my fitness business, which I have other businesses that I am an operator with. One of them's a women's health business. Yeah. I do have a nightlife event company. I do events. And then I have a coffee brand. So I travel a lot, and I travel internationally. I've been to India, I've been to Thailand, I've been to East Asia. So, but the way I stay on schedule with my travels, I call this very bro, right? Wherever I'm at, I always book a hotel that either has a gym or it's by a gym. It's non-negotiable. It's like, all right, like I'm not going to some place where, I guess I'll take a week off for 10 days. I'm not like, wherever I'm going, I don't care if I have to get in a tuk-tuk and drive 20, 30 minutes to some hole-in-the-wall gym that I found on Google Earth, or if no one speaks English and I'm having this, pay in the local language, fine. But I always book a hotel with a gym or by a gym. And I will always go in for my regular workout, even if the equipment is some random medley of, off-market stuff, self-built, whatever. I'll find something to do. Right? I'm a trainer. I know how to have a workout. Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know how to have a good workout, but I always do that. Yeah, and like my wife, obviously, we're married. Like same thing. It's like where we go. That's always the first thing you look up. Where are we staying? We're staying there. Okay, like is there a gym nearby? Look for one. Okay, found one. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be Planet Fitness. It could be Lifetime. It could be just anything. That always happens. Now that doesn't mean that my workouts are always super progressive. There's going to be times where it's like, all right, I'm just doing anything to just maintain the habit. But doing the workout is better than no workout, obviously. Yeah, and that by itself, it allows continuity where, not that I'm always in peak shape, but I'm never obviously opposite. I'm always able to, maintain training consistency. And I tell that to clients. I'm like, wherever you're traveling, like unless you are in the most remote location in like far northern Canada on an oil site, we're like, okay, I get it. There's nowhere to work out again. All right, fine, whatever. But unless that's not most people, obviously. But majority of the time you're traveling, you're in a major city, or a tier 2 city, you can find a hotel that has a treadmill. You can find a hotel that's by a Planet Fitness or Fitness 19 or an Anytime. Anytime's global now. You can find that and you can schedule that and you can do that in the morning because even if you're there for business, it's probably unlikely that your day is starting at 5 or 6 a.m. It probably starts at 8 or 9 and that gets done first.
Yeah. Hey, if you can find, a cocktail bar, if you can find a steakhouse, you can find a gym. Literally the same number of clicks on a button and you're going to find that spot. I love it. And for you, obviously, yeah, it's like, your movement patterns, you can make adjustments based on whatever equipment is there. That's such a valuable skill.
Mm-hmm.
And it's understanding kind of those key principles. I think a lot of people get bogged down, chasing complexity before they really master key skills and principles, right? It's like, when you start to understand those things, it gives you that diverse skill set where you can adapt in any environment and be successful. And so when it comes to you and when you're traveling, right? Like, do you have anything that you focus on intentionally with your nutrition? Any key components that are really foundational pillars?
Yeah, this is always a very fundamental practice that I think every fitness person does, but obviously, of course, protein intake. But every meal I just prioritize 30, 40 grams of protein. If I can't do that at all, if I'm in a place where like there's very low access to protein, I'll probably just take like a piece a day. Or maybe I'll have like a one meal dinner for a hotel. And then also I'll just do like a zero carb approach. Yeah, that's actually usually surprisingly easy to do. So just high protein intake, lower carbohydrate intake, possibly do like some 16-8, 20 and 4 fasting. Yeah, and that works. That makes it easy. Yeah, especially if you're in a situation where like I have to meet people in the evening. Okay, like if I'm gonna be having drinks, I'm having a huge meal, I'm just skipping the other two. Done. That's it.
I think it's the ability to focus on, again, these underlying principles without having the need for perfection that helps you continue to take steps in the right direction. I didn't even mean to rhyme right there, but wow, that's corny. But again, it's like you're never going to be perfect, particularly when that's your schedule. You've got to be thinking about one of my clients right now, and he travels every single week. He's been able to drop about 19 pounds, I believe, in 6 weeks. And the nutrition approach is very simple. Like when we're home, we're doing some things that are going to be a little bit more granular in terms of his tracking because, again, that's like something that he can do and he can stick with. However, he's on the road, again, multiple times, throughout the month, generally every week for 3 to 4 days. And so we typically do like a 16-8 approach. It's going to be very protein and plant-based, throughout the day. Understanding in the evening, he's likely going to have that business dinner where he might be at a steakhouse. He might be having a couple whiskeys, whatever it is. And it's understanding that like you can fit these things in and flow with them, but you have to be able to make adjustments to the other aspects of your day and just lean into what those are going to be, right? It doesn't have to be some all-encompassing thing where you're meal prepping everything, and trying to find a meal prep company halfway across the US or halfway across the world. But by putting simple structures in to limit calorie intake, again, 16-8, 24, whatever fasting protocol works best for you, going low carb, and being able to nail your protein, again, like that's 80% of it. If you nail that component, like you're at least not going to slide backward to the point where you're adding 7 pounds over the course of a week. And I think that's a lot of it. It's preventing the catastrophic fuck ups with nutrition that are more important than being perfect on the other days.
Health is simple things done well, not done perfectly, but just well. If someone really wants to be 100% with their, they're probably literally like a fitness professional or a bodybuilder. Because those are the guys that actually care. Because that's what really matters. If you are chasing, a true 1% physique, you're competing on the basis of what you look like. Yeah, like you're going to design your life around. That's not most people. Most people, fitness is a secondary or third or fourth priority. You don't live to work out, you work out to live. So you don't need that. You need that to be a perfect process. It's always going to be dynamic. And so long as it trends in an upward overall direction where there's discipline, there's structure, you're doing fine.
Yeah. I think it's that acceptance, right? I think a lot of people right now conflate a lot of things they see on social media, frankly, because, if you know marketing, if you know copywriting, much of it comes down to being very direct with your message and taking an angle, taking a side. And I think a lot of people kind of conflate what they see from quote unquote influencers, coaches, whatever you want, as gospel for what they need to understand. And frankly, I think a lot of people see a lot of surface level knowledge, but they don't gather the in-depth context from which it needs to be applied. And so I think becoming a principled thinker and being able to understand these things and be able to apply them in different ways becomes so important. Speaking of becoming like a principled thinker, so to speak, that's something I see that you do very well, whether it's a conscious or frankly unconscious behavior based on your art background. I also know that you are a voracious reader. Like, any books, any recommendations that you have for people who want to be able to understand how to make some of these adjustments, how to build the key pillars into their life that are going to be crucial for their success?
First principle thinkers. So the guy that I think popularized that, so it'd be like Nassim Taleb. He had his book series. I think the Black Swan was most culturally prominent one. And that's a great set of books. I would consider him probably the first philosopher in 50, 60 years. It's like actual social impact of their culture.
Yeah.
It was a book I was reading recently called Beyond Method. I can never remember the authors. So I should remember titles and authors. It's Beyond Method, but I mean, this is more fitness professionalish, but I actually really enjoyed it. That book detailed how the belief that there is a formal scientific method, discovery of knowledge, of inquiry, is not actually accurate. That the majority of what we discover and the majority of what we innovate is done through experimentation and experience formally. Which, for someone that's like, if you're trying to sort of creative, if you're working in a creative capacity with a business where you're having to really come up with ideas, I thought that was a really, really important. And also just from a brain candy standpoint.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, most of what I read that really helped me early on in my professional career was, this is going to be very generic, but Dan Kennedy. So Dan Kennedy's, I mean, it's very marketing oriented, how to get clients, how to market to customers, how to think about your market, how to think about your business. But I found that so helpful, especially like in my early 20s. It was all foreign to me, right? I'd never had worked a job. I have to, if you're a trainer, I'm like, well, you do have to market yourself. I have to present professionally. It's like, what do my clients actually want? Who's my ideal client? Like, how do you create positive word of mouth? And like, these are all things you take for granted. We've been doing it 10, 15, 30, 40 years. But in the beginning, like, start with Dan Kennedy. I've never really I don't think I've ever found anything since then that really equaled like the initial set of books I read by him. And he's got books on everything, how to target older markets, younger markets. I think he
marketing to the affluent market.
Marketing the affluent. Oh, they were awesome. Yeah, I still reference those from time to time as sort of like a refresher. It's like, open up a chapter, I'm like, this is great. You put back on the shelf. Yeah, most of what I read now, like I went through a period the last 6 years, so I tried to not read anything that was fitness and just read stuff that I found interesting. Which I went down like some rabbit holes, like Beyond Method. But then I got really into World War II history, which is like its own podcast, right? You can talk about World War II for hours. But World War II was cool because the one thing I think I always did differently from other personal trainers is still lacking to this day, is that when I started learning about fitness, because history was my favorite subject in school, I always wanted to know the history of whatever it was I was people do or what I was learning. So like, things we take for granted, like, oh, bench press, like, okay, well, who invented the bench press? Like, when did this exercise first appear, right? Like, I want to know the first guy that did this. Do we know who that is? How did it start? Like, who was the first person to make a bench, or like, press weight off their chest? And then doing that, like, okay, like, what did they do before the barbell was? Like, I mean, and you can go down all these various, historical pathways. Like, okay, how did guys train before the barbell? Like, and then you get the history of like, oh, dumbbells. Okay, well, how they train with dumbbells? Like, who innovated those systems? What did they do before dumbbells? Who was the first person to design like, weightlifting equipment, pulley machines? When when you understand the history of a thing and you know its origins, especially in fitness where so many things happen to innovate in the last 100 years, and you understand the nature of the thing and what the intentions were by the person who created it, it gives you better understanding of like, one, that the effects, whether it's effective, non-effective, middling effective for training, but it also fits into an overall historical contextual picture of people have been trying to get in shape for a long time. This is not a new problem. You can go back to like
no, not at all.
1800s, 1700s and look at exercise trends and group classes and lifting machines. I did a series when I was in Thailand back in 2020. I was there for most of where I got really into like ancient Greek methods of training. And I discovered this whole this repertoire, historical literature going back to like 100 AD in some cases, detailing periodization, for athletes. This is basically 2,000 years ago. And you realize reading these texts, like they kind of, when I say they, referring to like these athletic trainers, they figured out how to train athletes 2,000 years before exercise science was formal science. They talk about the need for high intensity days and moderate intensity days, and having low intensity days for recovery, and how different athletes have different needs in regards to performance, and whether you should have to lift more or less. If you are as a training different from distance runners versus sprinters. Like this is all formalized and practiced. It was super cool. I read this whole, I want to call it a book. It was like a very long ebook about it called Ancient Athletics. I spent like 30 years geeking out on it. And then you look at what we do in the gym today, and like, it's not any different. The only thing that's really changed in fitness today is that because we have benches that we lay down on, we do these exercises where we have obviously this bench. So we do that kind of like flat pressing. And you realize for most of human history, that's just, what I found interesting it didn't happen. And what I found most interesting reading the ancient Greek stuff is that I'd love to be challenged on this and have someone tell me I'm wrong, because I kept trying to find it. They didn't squat. There is no historical record of squatting. Now, they did lunges. They did a lot of sprinting. They did there are certain things that get mentioned very explicitly, like uphill sprinting, running hills, doing what I think was basically analogous like a lunge with hand weights. There's nothing that describes an actual in ancient Greek literature. It was really bizarre. I assumed it would be there, and you couldn't find it. But then like you go over to Japan, like sumo wrestling. Sumo wrestlers, they very obviously squat. Like the foundation of their whole training is built upon like the lower body, what they call, we call like the sumo style, like the wide stance squat. But ancient Greeks, you can't find any record of guys squatting. I don't even know if they actually squatted. I think for them, maybe they did something they probably did a body weight squat as maybe like a warm up, but they did not consider primary exercise. There's lists that exist of like these are the primary movements for total body strengthening. I have to pull them up, but what's listed is running is always number one for every kind of athlete. Running, sprinting, running up hills, wrestling. Then they get into like stone throwing. They get into rope climbing. They get into using hand weights. They used halteres. They used like stone dumbbells, basically doing like tons of lateral raises, lifting heavy stones. So you could say they did the deadlifts. Nothing that's squatting though. And then also nothing that's like push-ups. Like dips on dip bars, yes, but they didn't do squats. They didn't seem to actually do push-ups. But they had great physiques. And then, then it puts in perspective, like, do we actually need to squat, or can we just do like lunges and run? I mean, that's a fitness argument, right? Like you could argue that and listen to me for hours. Like this is the stupidest argument. Of course we need to squat. I'm like, do we though? Like if you get really strong, I mean, what is a Bulgarian split squat? Bulgarian split squat is basically just like a split lunge. Your foot's elevated. We know that. We know that works. It's like so then it was cool because I spent like basically like 4 or 5 years going through like all this orthodoxy of fitness, where I realized you can do whatever you want. Like if it works and produces results, and you know what, you got more lean body mass. Awesome. You're stronger. Awesome. Like lean body mass is obviously measurable. Your body condition improved. Your heart rate went down. Your blood pressure's improved. Like your physical performance, like we can measure physical performance. Your VO2 max went up. Who cares if you squat or bench press or not? Like there's no rules about this.
Yeah, I think that's important to note, and I think especially when we came up in the industry, I would say we were definitely in like a strength is the most important thing phase. And I don't mean to minimize the importance of it, but it was kind of coming off the heels of very popular West Side, really popular. I mean, Elite FTS was huge, had a lot of stuff like Jim Wendler, Dave Tate, again, like absolute legends in the game. Of course, you had like, Ripto saying bench squat or deadlift or you're a fucking pussy, like, all these different things, right? And so, it's really interesting to look at it. Like, the foundational movement's important. Yeah, but like you don't have to live and die by the barbell on these different things. If you understand the movement pattern, you can adjust around it. It's going to be crucial. But I think the overall concept is like success comes from being very consistent with the basics. And most of those are going to be very simple. You're reflecting on Greek, training. I don't have the experience going through that like you do, but I think of guys like George Hackenschmidt, right? The importance of strength and longevity, where he said health can never be divorced from strength. Even if you look at somebody a little bit more modern, in the case of Arnold, right? Like if you look at Arnold's original training, he might be known for like super high volume body part splits, but his original training was the Golden Six program. It was performed 3 days a week. Barbell back squat, wide grip, bench, chin up, behind the neck press, curl, and a sit up. He did those basic things. Obviously he had elite genetics, but at the same time, you get really good at those basic things. You're going to have a better physique if you stay consistent. for months, for years, than 99.9% of the people in the world. It just comes down to consistency and focusing on those core principles.
Yeah, one of the terms I use with my clients, so I think anyone in business is familiar with the concept of KPI, key performance indicator.
Yeah.
So what I tell everybody is that everyone has KPIs, everyone has key performance indicators. Yeah, this is a poor attempt at being numerical. 80% of your results are going to come from about 8 exercises. Everyone that's trained consistently knows this. Everyone, if you were to narrow down your training to like, hey, what movements really work for you? It's probably going to be similar to most people, and it's also going to be a bit different, but it's going to be about 8 exercises. You go through the major muscle groups, like, all right, what's your favorite movement for the chest and your shoulders and your back, and your quads and hamstrings? It's going to be about 8, say 10 maximum. That's 80% of your results. That's where in your first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of training, that's what's building your physique, and that's what you do long term. And then that 20% is just the filler stuff of like, hey, I'm going to do lateral raises with cables this month versus dumbbells. Like obviously do lateral raises, but
fun bro shit.
Yeah, you do the bro pump stuff. Like I'm going to experiment with some arms. Like a curl is a curl, a lateral raise is a lateral raise. Like you can change the implement, it's still the same pattern. Yeah, and if it came down to a minimal situation where it's like, all right, you can do 3 things today in the gym and you got to leave. What are you going to do? And like, the majority of the time you're going to do some type of press for your chest. You're going to do some type of press for your shoulders. You do some in-between kind of, pressy thing. It's like a decline or a mid, low incline, or you can do push-up, whatever. It's going to be those 3. Yeah, and then as everybody finds out, it's like, all right, well, what if you have terrible genetics? I'm like, terrible genetics are where, like, from a bodybuilding standpoint, is where, like, then you have to start getting weird, where, like, maybe you just need to stick with chest flies and, like, push-ups to failure, and, like, that is what works for you because your arm span is this wide, and your rib cage is just flat. And it's like, okay, just basically just throw out all the heavy stuff. But that's not most people. Most guys, again, that mid-range, middle of the bell curve, 80% of your results from about 8 exercises, and you're doing more or less the same thing that everybody else does, with just slight modifications and training implements.
That's really what it is, right? And I'm thinking, like, as you're saying that, I'm like, like my 3 exercises, I would probably do, a 1-arm dumbbell row, probably a low incline dumbbell bench press, and for me, probably a conventional deadlift. But I might rotate through different things, right? It could be, one day is a inverted row. The next day is a single arm dumbbell bench press. And maybe then I'll do a Bulgarian split squat, right? And that's going to be the meat and potatoes. I think people love to fall in love with all the other shit, but like reality, if you really commit to those basic things, you're going to get more bang for your buck than you ever thought possible. Alexander, let me rip through a couple rapid fire questions for you.
Go.
All right, man, you can put a billboard. I'm not going to say Times Square because I've not been there in a while, but anywhere that people are going to see it, you can put one quote, one phrase, one concept on it. What are you going to put on?
Go to the gym.
Love it. All right. One piece of advice for your younger self when you were getting started with your own training.
One piece of advice? Oh, Jesus. One thing I would have told myself to stop wasting time trying to be a powerlifter because you have terrible both proportions and training. Get strong with dumbbells and weighted calisthenics. Do that. You will save yourself. You will save yourself from a ton of injuries. So.
No doubt. I think a lot of us can relate to that. Again, especially as I mentioned, kind of the powerlifting, power building era that was so popular. All right, final question. You were on death row. We're not going to explain why. You have one last meal. Eat whatever you want, drink whatever you want, smoke whatever you want. What's that meal going to be like?
I mean, he's dead now, but I would get, if I could bring him back to life, I would get a Iron Chef Chiba to make me like a omakase sushi dinner with like a Don Julio 1942.
Ooh, Good choice. Sushi and tequila, man, can't beat that. Can't beat that. Awesome. Alexander, where can we learn more from you, more about you? Give us the deets.
Yeah. Used to be Twitter, now it's called X. I'm on X, AJA_Cortes. And then I'm also on Instagram, same handle. And I have written a newsletter for the past 8 years, which is 50,000 people in that newsletter. But I write a weekly newsletter, which I've been writing a long time. But any of those 3 places, it's a good place to find me. And if you want to work together, you're just want to make an inquiry, the newsletter, sending me an email is always the best place. My inbox is on social media with Instagram or a shit show, thousands of messages. So send me an email if you want to get in touch.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Cannot wait to share this one with everybody. And thank you.
Eric.
Hey, it's Eric here again. Now, there are 3 ways that I can help you look great naked. Number 1, if you want to grab a free copy of the Look Great Naked protocol to help you lose body fat without counting calories, then go to bachperformance.com/free training. Number 2, if you're a busy guy looking to build muscle, then I recommend checking out our Minimalist Muscle Blitz, which has helped over 1,000 men build muscle without living in the gym. Just go to minimalistmuscleblitz.com. The link will also be available in the show notes. Or number 3, and last, if you want to work with me directly and get the best results possible, apply at bachperformance.com/coaching to look great naked without living in the gym. Until next time, my friend,